"You're always the embarrassment," my family proclaimed every holiday. So when I bought my dream apartment, I hosted a huge party and sent invites to everyone but them. They discovered it on social media, and the comments were glorious. I, 32M, never thought the day would come when I'd completely cut my family out of my life. But here we are. Growing up, I was always the black sheep. While my siblings excelled in sports and academics, I was the one who struggled with everything. My parents made it clear from an early age that I was their disappointment. Every family gathering was torture. My mother would introduce my older brother as the successful lawyer, my sister as the brilliant doctor, and then there was me. She'd either skip me entirely or mention me with this apologetic tone, explaining how I was still figuring things out. My father would add his commentary about how I needed to get my act together and stop being such an embarrassment to the family name. The breaking point came last Christmas. We were at my parents' house, and relatives were asking about everyone's achievements. My brother had just made partner at his firm, and my sister had published research in some medical journal. When they got to me, I mentioned that I'd been promoted to senior software engineer at a major tech company. I was actually doing well for myself, making good money, and had been working on some exciting projects. My father scoffed and said I was just playing around with computers like a child. My mother chimed in, telling everyone that at least I was finally making enough money to support myself, though she doubted it would last. My sister laughed and said she was surprised anyone would trust me with important software. The entire room went quiet, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. That night, I decided I was done. Completely done. For months, I threw myself into work and saving money. The promotion had come with a significant raise, and I'd been living below my means for years. I started apartment hunting in the most exclusive part of the city, determined to find something that would make a statement. The apartment I found was perfect. 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom corner unit on the 35th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The building had a doorman, a rooftop terrace, and a fitness center that looked like something out of a magazine. The rent was more than my parents' mortgage, but I could afford it comfortably. Moving day was surreal. As I stood in my empty apartment, looking out at the city below, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pride. This was mine. I had earned this through my own hard work, despite everything my family had said about me. I spent the next few weeks furnishing the place. I didn't go overboard, but everything was quality. A sleek sectional sofa, a dining table that could seat 8, artwork for the walls, and a sound system that filled the space with crystal-clear music. The place looked like something out of an architecture magazine. The idea for the party came to me while I was setting up my home office. I wanted to celebrate this achievement, this new chapter in my life. But more than that, I wanted to show everyone who had ever doubted me exactly what I was capable of. I started planning the party meticulously. I reached out to college friends I'd lost touch with, coworkers, neighbors from my old building, even some acquaintances from social media. I hired a catering company that specialized in upscale events and arranged for an open bar. I rented additional furniture to accommodate the crowd I was expecting. The invitations went out 3 weeks in advance. Digital invites with photos of the apartment and the city view. I included everyone I could think of, except my family. My parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, none of them received an invitation. The responses started pouring in immediately. People were excited, impressed by the apartment photos, and eager to celebrate with me. Several mentioned how amazing the place looked and how proud they were of my success. It felt incredible to have people genuinely happy for my achievements instead of finding ways to diminish them. 2 weeks before the party, I started posting subtle hints on social media. Photos of the apartment during sunset, the view from my balcony, catered food samples I was testing. I made sure my privacy settings allowed my family to see these posts, but I didn't engage with any of their comments or messages. My mother was the first to reach out. She sent a text asking about the apartment and mentioning that she'd seen my posts. She said it looked nice and asked when I was planning to have everyone over to see it. I read the message and deleted it without responding. My father called the next day. He left a voicemail saying he'd heard I'd moved and wanted to know why I hadn't told them about the party he'd seen mentioned online. He said the family was confused about why they hadn't been invited and that my mother was hurt. I saved the voicemail but didn't call back. My brother tried a different approach. He messaged me on social media, congratulating me on the apartment and asking if there had been some mistake with the invitations. He said everyone was looking forward to seeing the place and celebrating with me. I left him on read. The night of the party arrived, and my apartment was transformed. The catering staff had set up elegantly arranged food stations throughout the living room and kitchen. The bar area was stocked with top-shelf liquor, wine, and craft beer. I'd hired a photographer to capture the evening, and soft jazz music played through the sound system. Guests started arriving at 7, and within an hour, the apartment was buzzing with conversation and laughter. People were genuinely impressed with the place, and I found myself surrounded by friends and colleagues who were excited to be there. The photographer moved through the crowd, capturing candid moments and group shots. Around 9 o'clock, I decided to make a toast. I stood on my balcony with the city lights twinkling behind me and raised my glass. I thanked everyone for coming and for being such an important part of my life. I mentioned how grateful I was for their support and friendship, especially during challenging times. Several people cheered and raised their glasses, and someone shouted that I deserved all the success in the world. The party went until well past midnight. People didn't want to leave, and several mentioned it was one of the best parties they'd attended in years. As the last guests were saying goodbye, many hugged me and said how proud they were to know me. The photographer handed me a USB drive with hundreds of photos from the evening. The next morning, I woke up feeling better than I had in months. As I cleaned up the apartment and looked through the photos from the night before, I realized something important had shifted. I had surrounded myself with people who valued and supported me, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. I selected the best photos from the party and created a social media album. Pictures of the crowded apartment filled with smiling friends, the elegant food presentation, groups of people laughing on the balcony with the city skyline behind them, and shots of the beautifully decorated space. I wrote a caption thanking everyone who came and expressing how grateful I was for such amazing friends and colleagues in my life. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments poured in from people who had attended, others who wished they could have been there, and friends from other cities who were impressed by the photos. People were tagging their friends, sharing the photos, and commenting on how incredible everything looked. But the comments that made my day were from mutual acquaintances who knew my family situation. One college friend wrote about how she remembered my family always putting me down and how amazing it was to see me surrounded by people who appreciated me. Another mentioned how clear it was that I had found my chosen family and how happy I looked in every photo. The comments kept coming throughout the day. People were praising the apartment, the party, and most importantly, celebrating my success. It was exactly the validation I had been craving for years, but coming from people who actually mattered to me. Update 1. 3 days after posting the party photos, my phone started ringing constantly. My mother called 6 times in one afternoon, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. She said the whole family had seen the posts and couldn't understand why they hadn't been included. She mentioned how hurt everyone was and how this was causing problems within the extended family. My sister sent a long text message explaining how embarrassed she was when her friends started asking why she hadn't been at her brother's amazing party. She said people were wondering if there was some family drama they didn't know about, and she was having to make excuses for why none of them had been there. But the message that really got to me came from my father. He left a voicemail that started angry but gradually shifted to something approaching desperation. He said he didn't understand what he'd done wrong and that the family was falling apart because of this situation. He mentioned how my aunts and uncles were asking questions and how embarrassing it was to admit they hadn't even known about my new apartment. I listened to all the messages but didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I screenshot some of the most supportive comments from my party posts and saved them. Reading those positive words from friends and colleagues reminded me why I'd made this decision in the first place. A week later, my cousin reached out. She was one of the few family members who had always been kind to me, and I actually felt bad about not inviting her. She said she understood there was tension in the family, but asked if we could meet for coffee to talk about what happened. I agreed to meet her, mainly because I was curious about how the family was handling the situation. We met at a cafe downtown, and she immediately started asking about the apartment and the party. She said the photos looked incredible and that she was genuinely happy for my success. Then she told me what I'd been hoping to hear. She said the family gathering the previous weekend had been chaos. My parents had spent the entire time trying to figure out how to handle the situation, and my siblings were fielding questions from their friends about why they hadn't been at the party everyone was talking about. My cousin said my mother had tried to play it off like there had been some miscommunication with the invitations, but too many people had seen my social media posts to believe that story. She mentioned that several relatives had commented on how successful and happy I looked in the photos, and how impressed they were with what I'd accomplished. The best part was hearing about my siblings' reactions. My brother had been forced to admit to his law firm colleagues that he hadn't been invited to his own brother's party, which led to questions about our relationship that he couldn't answer without looking bad. My sister had similar problems with her medical colleagues, who kept bringing up the photos and asking about the family dynamic. My cousin asked if I planned to reconcile with the family, and I told her honestly that I wasn't sure. I explained how years of being treated like the family disappointment had finally taken their toll, and this party had been my way of surrounding myself with people who actually valued me. Update 2. A month after the party, the situation escalated in a way I hadn't expected. My mother showed up at my apartment building unannounced. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to see her, and I told him I wasn't available. She waited in the lobby for 3 hours, according to the doorman, before finally leaving. The next day, I received a certified letter from my parents. It was a formal invitation to a family dinner where they wanted to discuss recent events and work toward healing our family relationships. The letter was written in my father's legal language style and felt more like a business proposition than an apology. I threw the letter away without responding. 2 weeks later, my social media notifications exploded again. My mother had commented on the original party photos, writing a long message about how proud she was of my success and how the whole family wanted to celebrate with me. She mentioned how there had been some confusion about invitations, but that she hoped we could move past it. The response from my friends was swift and brutal. People who had witnessed years of my family's treatment started commenting with their own observations. My college roommate wrote about how he remembered my parents visiting once and spending the entire time criticizing everything about my life choices. A coworker mentioned how I told her about family gatherings where I was consistently made to feel inadequate. But the comment that really summed up the situation came from my best friend from high school. He wrote that he remembered my parents telling people I was their disappointment child at my own graduation party, and how amazing it was to see me finally surrounded by people who recognized my worth. My mother deleted her comment within hours, but not before dozens of people had responded. The screenshots had already been taken, and several friends sent them to me privately with messages of support. The final straw came when my brother tried to show up at my workplace. Security called me down to the lobby, where he was waiting with what he clearly thought was going to be a persuasive speech about family obligations and forgiveness. He told me I was being childish and that my behavior was hurting everyone. He said I was making the whole family look bad and that I needed to fix the situation before it got worse. When I asked him what exactly he thought I needed to fix, he said I should apologize for excluding them and host another party where they could save face with their friends. I looked at him standing there in his expensive suit, still trying to make this about how my actions were affecting him, and realized nothing had changed. He still didn't understand that years of being treated like garbage had consequences. I told him I was done with the conversation and walked back to my office. He called after me, saying I was making a huge mistake and that family was supposed to be forever. I kept walking. Update 3. 6 months have passed since the party, and my life has never been better. I've been promoted again at work, largely due to the confidence I gained from cutting toxic influences out of my life. The energy I used to spend trying to win my family's approval has been redirected into my career and relationships that actually matter. I've hosted 3 more gatherings in my apartment, smaller, intimate dinners with close friends. Each time, I'm reminded of how different it feels to be surrounded by people who genuinely enjoy my company and celebrate my successes without reservation. My family's attempts to reconcile have gradually decreased. My mother still sends occasional text messages on holidays, but they've lost their desperate edge. My siblings have apparently moved on to other family drama, and my father has stopped calling altogether. The most satisfying part has been watching my chosen family grow stronger. The friends who defended me in those social media comments have become even closer, and I've formed new friendships with people who appreciate authenticity over family obligation. Last month, my cousin texted me with an update from the latest family gathering. Apparently, my absence has become the new normal, and people have stopped asking where I am. She said my parents have started telling people I'm focusing on my career when asked about me, which feels like the closest thing to respect I'll ever get from them. The apartment still brings me joy every single day. Waking up to that city view, Having space that's entirely my own, and knowing I earned every square foot through my own hard work, it never gets old. Sometimes I wonder if I'll regret cutting them out completely, but then I remember how it felt to stand on that balcony surrounded by people who were genuinely happy for my success. I remember the comments from friends who had watched my family diminish me for years, and how validating it was to finally have that behavior called out publicly. The revenge wasn't in excluding them from one party. The revenge was in building a life so successful and fulfilling that their absence didn't matter. It was in surrounding myself with people who saw my worth when my own family couldn't. It was in finally understanding that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who choose to support and celebrate you. I don't regret a single moment of that decision. The only regret I have is not making it sooner. My apartment is hosting another gathering next weekend, a celebration for a friend's promotion. As I plan the menu and send out invitations to people who matter, I'm reminded again that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well without the people who try to hold you back. The family that proclaimed I was always the embarrassment learned that exclusion works both ways. And judging by the comments on social media and the life I've built since, it's pretty clear who came out ahead.